Hi guys, welcome back. This is chapter 10 with Professor Ren. Yes, I know they rhyme. In chapter 8, we went over perfect competition. In chapter 9, we went over monopolies. And now we're going over monopolistic competition and oligopolies. So in this chapter, we're going to begin with monopolistic competition. This is the other competitive market. There are two competitive ones, perfect competition and monopolistic competition. The other two, the oligopoly and the monopoly, are quite the opposite. They are not competitive. So let's look at this one. Many sellers, just like perfect competition. However, slightly differentiated product or service, meaning in this case, you can distinguish a little bit. For instance, you might have a favorite stylist. There might be many salons or barbers in town, but you still go to one in particular. You think they get you better, they understand your hair better, you like their pricing better, you like the ambiance, you like the distance from your house. There are many different reasons why you end up with a favorite, but can you go somewhere else and get something similar? Yes, they're not unique, but still, they're distinguishable enough to be able to charge different prices and offer different services. And there are no barriers to entry, meaning it's like perfect competition with the exception of the product. Instead of an identical product or a perfect substitute or a homogeneous product, all those are synonyms, what you have is the opposite. You have a heterogeneous or a slightly differentiated product or service. And the examples are many. Restaurants, clothing stores. Actually, let's go to the examples now. So the examples are pharmacies, for instance. Can you go to CVS and buy something that you can also find at Walgreens or Target or Walmart? Absolutely. Take Italian restaurants, let's say, right? How many places can you buy pizza from, for instance? Lots of places. You can even order a pizza with the same ingredients, sausage, eggs, mushrooms, right, cheese, but you still have a pizza that is superior to another. You still think this place deserves to charge me $20 for this pizza. It's great, but this other place, no way, it's not good enough, maybe for $12. So the consumer distinguishes these products. They don't feel like you might have a place where it's the only place you ever buy your pizza because you're like everybody else doesn't make good pizza, or the opposite, right? You might have 5, 6 places you love. As long as their prices are similar, you don't mind. But there is a distinction between them. This is true of any restaurant. The grilled seafood is still going to vary. The drinks, they're still going to vary. People even feel a cocktail from one place versus the other is superior or inferior, and they want to adjust the prices for it. Clothing, think of all the places you can buy a white t-shirt, for instance. They would be different prices, different cuts, different quality, but they're all white t-shirts. But you're still willing to pay $25 for this one, but not that one, depending on the quality and the size and the style and the shape. Even though they are all simply white, you still feel that they're distinguishable. Physicians. Can you change physicians? Can you go to a different primary physician? Sure. Do you still have a favorite? Probably. You still feel that some offices are better suited for you than others. You enjoy them more. You enjoy how they treat you more, even though both doctors can probably give you a similar diagnosis and a similar prescription. But sometimes they can be very different. One person wants to push medication on you. The other one wants a lifestyle change from you, which is the superior doctor, really. But you can see how even though they're both physicians, they are not necessarily identical. Cell phones. Think of all the cell phones you can buy on the market. They all make phone calls, they all text, they all allow you to do very similar functions. But nobody says that the cell phone they bought is identical to the cell phone somebody else bought. They feel theirs is a little bit better or a little bit worse depending on what they got, right? So all those are examples. Basically, most products on the market fall in the category of monopolistic competition. Now, let's look at an oligopoly. Oligopoly is our fourth market structure. An oligopoly looks a lot like a monopoly. What's the difference? The difference is up here. It's only few sellers. Instead of one seller, it's few, but not many, because if it becomes many, then it becomes monopolistic competition, meaning a monopoly can go from one company in the market to 3, and now it's an oligopoly. Then it goes from 3 to 7 or 8, and now it's monopolistic competition. So it does depend on how many sellers there are. Now, oligopoly is kind of interesting because it's the only one that can have a homogeneous or a heterogeneous product. If you look at the second characteristic, identical or slightly differentiated. Identical might be, for instance, You know, the three companies that report our credit, you know, it's funny, they come up with different scores, but they're supposed to be doing something identical. But it's possible three companies sell a raw material. It's the same exact raw material, and therefore they fall in the category of a homogeneous raw material, but there are only a few of them. Slightly differentiated would be something like airlines, why I kind of chose this background for you. I mean, actually, I'm going to talk about it in just a minute. Let's just leave it for now. Extremely high barriers to entry. Just like a monopoly, it also has patents, licenses, and public franchises. But instead of one company because of a patent, it's two or three. Instead of, one license is two or three. And oligopoly is mutually interdependent. What does that mean that they are mutually interdependent? Mutually interdependent means, here, let's write that down. It means the behavior of one impacts the behavior of the others. If one changes their prices, the other ones change their prices as well. For instance, if one lowers its prices, it may force the other ones to also lower their prices because they impact their sales. So you have, look, when people sometimes ask me how many is a few, it's kind of a little tricky. If I said to you, hand me a few towels, you'll probably hand me 3. If I said, hand me a few peanuts, I hope to God you don't hand me 3. Right? Because nobody would think that would be like the cheapest thing to do. So maybe with peanuts, it's definitely a handful, but how many peanuts is that? So instead of getting hung up on 3 and 5 and 7, here's what you ask yourself. Are they mutually interdependent? There could be 5 that are mutually interdependent. It's an oligopoly. And there could be 4 that are not, and they're not. Mutually interdependent means when one makes bold moves, like lowers their prices, changes the distribution of their product, introduces a major important technology, the other ones have to copy it to survive. That's the mutual interdependence. The behavior of one impacts the behavior of the others. Things like of friends in a clique, how the behavior of one can impact where everybody goes and how they do things, or a marriage, the behavior of one spouse impacts the life of the other one. Extreme barriers to entry. They're the same as a monopoly. The difference is those barriers produce a few instead of one company. The same thing with economies of scale and exclusive ownership of a scarce resource. Like here. Let's go over it here. So here are some examples. The first one, due to economies of scale, let's use, for instance, the airlines or baby products. Let's look at how we treat the airlines. Now, I am not telling you that there isn't an airline that completely stands out. Like we know, for instance, that Qatar Air or the United Arab Emirates Air or Singapore Air, they can provide exceptional experience and may be able to charge more than one expects. And okay, good. But nonetheless, what you find is, look at how you and I typically buy a ticket. So I'm going to tell you how I buy a ticket, and I bet you this is how you buy yours. I want to fly on the first Tuesday of February, and I want a nonstop flight between Phoenix and Tampa, Florida, for instance. Well, if I look that up and I want to fly in the morning, I will find that there are maybe 2-3 options tops. Now, all of them are going to be similar. You know, one will be Delta, one will be American, you know, one might be Southwest. Are they that different from one another? Not really. They're both uncomfortable. Or all three, they're all expensive. The way I look at it at that point is, which one is the cheapest? You know, so I look at it as, okay, which one is going to be cheapest for me? Which one is going to get me there closest to the time I want? And I go with that one. The odds are they're all getting me there around the same time, an hour or two differentiation, not huge. And the price is going to be relatively similar, but something will be a little bit better. And that little something will push me to one, but I generally view them as pretty much the same. They're all uncomfortable. I don't love flying with any of them. They're all not going to, be on time. They're all possibly going to be delayed. You see what happens? So we view them as more homogeneous than perhaps buying maybe a car or a house, right? So a house could possibly be in an oligopoly. You could live in an area where you want to build a new house and there are only 3 builders that build new houses. Well, that's not a lot of competition. At that point, you decide between them based on who can give you the best floor plan and the best price, and you shop around, and you definitely distinguish more in that case. It's no longer quite homogeneous. You think it's much more going to be differentiated between them. Baby products, there are only a few companies that actually make organic baby food, for instance, and they copy each other highly, so we know that they are an oligopoly. Diamond distributors. So economies of scale is why we end up with, only 4 major airlines in the United States and only 2 or 3 baby product producers in the US. Diamond distributors, there are only 12 in the world. Never mind how many in the US, there are 3. And so what you're looking at is it's exclusive ownership. Only 3 distributors have a way of getting enough diamonds from a serious mine, and consequently they're the only ones who are able to distribute and sell to jewelry stores that turn those diamonds, into rings and necklaces, etc. As far as government monopolies, the 3 credit rating companies, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, those 3 companies qualify in this case as being a government monopoly because you have to have a license, and only 3 have a license. So instead of a license given to one company, like in the case of Crane & Company for the paper that the Fed prints the ink on to turn it into money, there are 3 who have it. That makes them an oligopoly. Public franchises, it's often the electric companies, sometimes the cable companies in town, maybe not natural gas or water. It depends really on the town and the state, but you might have, for instance, only 2 cable companies or only 2 or 3 electric companies, and that makes them an oligopoly. And patents, patents are also partly economies of scale. For instance, there's only 1 nuclear-powered aircraft carrier builder in the US, and there are only 2 or 3 in the world. They are extremely expensive and prohibitive as far as costs to build. Because of that case, you will find that the government monitors, plus of course this is really dangerous technology and it's important and it's often built for the federal government, so they're not going to go around wanting everybody to have a plan. It's called espionage and protection and national security. So you can see how they're not going to be issuing patents hail-nil. So patents are going to be carefully issued, but in this case, it's also economies of scale because it is extremely expensive. We're talking about billions of dollars of production here to actually put out a product like that. So those are the examples. Okay, I'm going to stop this video and come back and pick up video number 2.